Hello, and again, welcome to Bit Depth. I'm Santiago Ramones. Across from me is...
Melissa Wimbish.
Britt Olsen-Ecker.
And I guess with your powers combined, you become...
Outcalls.
Yeah.
Woo! I'm really glad to have you guys on. It's, your music is really, really cool and is doing something different. How would you describe, I know that genre is kind of BS anyways nowadays, but how would you describe your music?
Oh, such a $1 million question for Outcalls.
Yeah.
We love to just write songs in so many different genres. We have that classical edge, pop, pretty much everything. Melissa, what else?
My favorite description so far is cinematic.
Yes,
and I think
cinematic.
That totally, yeah. Cinematic is definitely a nod to our background in performance, in stage performance, and everything we have created so far. When I think back to the conversations Britt and I have had while we're making these songs, and even the way we communicate with the musicians we work with, we're always setting some kind of stage.
Scene.
Yeah, a scene. Like, here's what's happening. And that's just the way we communicate. And I'm sure a lot of other people communicate that way. Great. I'm not saying it's anything super original, but that's how our music.
Yeah, I think that we see like the music video first sometimes, and then that informs the way we laid the tracks down in the studio.
Mm-hmm.
How did you guys get to know each other? How did this begin?
Ooh, it all began many years ago. I mean, like 10 years ago now. I feel like we met each other.
It's been a long time. And I wonder if we both have different versions of how we met. My big memory is we had an audition for a theater company, and we met in this little park with a mutual friend who was also auditioning for that company, and we all ran our monologues for each other. And I was like, I'm going to make that bitch my friend.
I love that. That's my favorite.
I just immediately loved her. And I think it still took a while before we really had a chance to develop a friendship, because we just didn't run in the same circles in that way.
Yes.
And then, of course, the biggest memory for me with as far as music and finally like coming together on that was when we did an open mic, and Britt was there, and she did a reading of a poem that she had written. And I had a band there that was a band that had been playing for a theater company that she was involved in. We were just kind of like the pit band for that production. And Britt was there, and I just remember getting pretty drunk and being like, you should be in this band.
Love it. Yeah, it was like the Single Carrot days, the early Single Carrot days of auditioning for this theater company, getting to know each other, being involved in music in these productions, and then, basically doing this 90s hip hop and R&B cover band.
And then how did that kind of evolve into what Outcalls became?
Melissa started singing with Outcalls a few years before I joined. Right?
I think it was a little over a year, maybe.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Okay.
Enough time for the band to rehearse like pretty regularly on a weekly basis. And we recorded our first EP. And then as we were putting the finishing touches on the first EP, the engineer and self-proclaimed band leader at the time was disappointed with some of the keyboards. Wanted a different sound for the keyboards, and of course Britt's name came up, and he asked her to do it. And then it was like this segue into, hey, why don't you just be in the band, which was awesome. And then it turned out to be their undoing.
We took over. Melissa always talks about this one time we were at maybe at that same bar.
We were at the same bar. That's what's so great.
Which is so funny.
Liam's.
That's
right.
We played together. Melissa and I would just play these, open mics together. And I don't remember this, but she told me that I whispered to her, "Let's take over the band," or something along those lines.
I whispered it to you, I think.
Oh,
but who
okay.
knows with as much alcohol that there was.
Perfect. See, I'm not even remembering it correctly. But yeah.
But that's totally, it was the same bar. And yeah, it was, but Evan, I hate saying his name, but whatever. Evan had, he was there at that same open mic, and I don't remember if we all played together, but whatever. The point is, Britt wasn't in the band yet. Then she was formally asked to be in the band, and after many drinks, either she or I were like, let's take over. These motherfuckers don't know what they're doing. Over.
Yeah. So that's the beginnings of Outcalls. Yeah.
So then I guess a little bit into your background, I guess, like how did either of you get started in music, but then how it kind of became into this pop cinematic opera, whatever you would call the genre. Because I think that I toe the line between the two as well, between classical music and pop music or contemporary music. And I feel like sometimes classical musicians are scared to go into pop world, and then contemporary musicians like don't know anything about classical world. Mm-hmm. And so I guess how do you guys cross that bridge?
Do you want to start, Melissa?
You go ahead. You go first.
Sure. Well, I came to music school with an open mind. I loved theater. I loved performing. I loved doing all types of music. I loved listening to all types of music. And I remember like my huge fear as a freshman going into school was that nobody was going to listen to like pop music. I was going to be surrounded by people who just listened to classical music, which of course is totally nuts. But I always wanted a really broad education, and I actively pursued opportunities beyond the walls of the conservatory. I auditioned for musicals, theater. I sang. I studied jazz. I took lessons from the jazz teacher, and just wanted to give myself a really well-rounded education. I never thought I would be in a band. I thought I would continue to do theater and all that sort of stuff. But it ended up becoming exactly what I wanted and what I needed. This performing in this band is all of the things that I want to do in one, which is great. So that's a little bit about my background.
Yeah, I have a very similar mindset about it. I never ever wanted to be an opera singer because I didn't even know what opera was. I grew up in Kansas, and we didn't it just wasn't part of it wasn't on my radar at all until I started auditioning for musical theater programs because I loved musical theater. But basically everybody that I auditioned for and came in contact with to prepare me for auditions pushed me in the direction of opera. And I thought, fuck it, I'll do this. And then maybe at some point I'll be good enough for musical theater. And that never happened. I did fall in love with my teachers and my, and what I was learning. But much like Britt, I just never, I didn't know anything about opera. So here I am like in conservatory and everybody's referencing, oh, Lorenzo Figaro, and what role did you do in this? And I could never hang with those conversations.
Same. That's funny. I don't think we've ever talked about that, but it's so true. And I just was so turned off by it.
Yes, me too. I mean, there's part of me that thought I should know this, but then I never did. I never figured any of it out. I thought if I'm doing the opera, then I'll learn about it, and that's great. And I can say that any of the operas that I've done, of course, like I learn about them and I appreciate them, but I cannot tell you what the fuck happened in any opera that I haven't been in myself. Just because, it's never been a part of my desire to beef up on that history. I just wanted to learn how to sing well. and
Yes,
opera just
exactly,
happened to be one of the features of that. So, but another thing, and I think Britt would agree with this, another reason I believe a lot of classical artists are have that wall up is because they're taught they have to.
Yes.
They're taught that they need to just pick something. And even within the walls of classical training, you're taught, well, you're a classical singer, but you need to decide if you're going to be early music or 17th century, or are you going to do bel canto? So it's a lot of being told that you need to decide.
Yeah, I remember a teacher telling me that in a summer program that I did. She said something along the lines of, you need to choose. I can hear it in your voice. And I remember being so turned off. I remember even journaling about it, being like, fuck this person. Sorry, Santiago. I don't know if we're allowed to curse on this.
You can say whatever the fuck you want.
But I remember just being like, why do I have to choose? Why do I have to choose? Why should I limit myself? That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I kind of felt that too. And I guess a little background on me, but like I did vocal music education for 2 years. And then I changed majors to music production, and I was never quite in either world enough either, because whenever I was in like classical world with like vocal music, I learned bel canto style singing and stuff, but I was never interested in, it's like, oh, this symphony and this opera and this thing, and I just didn't care.
Yeah.
And I still don't really care.
Yeah.
And then whenever I went into contemporary world, I knew all this music theory and stuff, and all this stuff is foundational to the way that I make music. But then like people didn't care about that either, and so it's like, no, but like the complex chords, it all contributes to the thing, and so how does your classical background feed into your pop background?
I think it just makes me know when to roll my eyes at people better.
Oh my God, I love that. Yeah. No, there's something to be said about what Melissa just said. I think, it informs your taste as a consumer. Melissa and I really appreciate great singing. We really do. And not to say that like people's unique voices completely turn us off. Absolutely not. I think there are so many performers out there, like somebody like SZA, for example, whom I really love her voice.
Yeah.
It's very different than what we do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I'm actually surprised sometimes at how little like technical language I have to communicate to our backing players who play in the backing band. Sometimes it just takes an adjective like ugh or like that's yucky for it to really resonate. That's really and I think that it's okay to have those moments and use those words to describe what you're feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that if you are working with good musicians and people that you know and have worked with over time, that is kind of all you need. It's like, oh, I need a little bit more in this thing.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. And I think we've also discovered that anybody who tries to belittle you if you don't have that language probably isn't flexible. They're just not flexible. And the really great musicians that we've worked with we've never had a problem with that. They've never made us feel that we should know a little bit more.
Right.
Yeah.
It makes a big
trust
difference.
our instincts. Yeah. It makes a huge difference.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think with that, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you guys do in your music that is, I guess, unheard of normally. It's like, ooh, cool. There's like this sort of instrumentation or this kind of thing. Is there any sort of like, I don't know if you're like going for something or if it's just like, here's what we want to try, or I like this instrument being in the thing, or I like this style being in the thing, and that's just what we're going to do.
Yeah, it's organic. I think there are songs that we write that we want to imitate other ideas, or I think back to No King, and Melissa had the great idea to bring in a Baroque cello that really, I feel like, tied the whole thing together. It was really, really remarkable. But that was just like, let's try this. That's my favorite word.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And the more we started to embrace that term, I think we became more effective with being in the studio. Let's just try it. Why are we worrying so much about whether or not it's going to be anything? Why don't we, as soon as we listen to it, we always know.
Exactly.
So why are we so afraid to just listen to it? When did that get canceled out? Oh, no, I'm not even going to, I'm not even going to attempt that. Oh, that sounds like it's not going to work. What, if you have time, just try it and then you'll know.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you tell that voice to shut up? I mean, I feel like sometimes, a lot of musicians that are trying something maybe are like, oh, well, this would be too cheesy or this would be too something. What kind of allows you to let yourself get away with it?
Well, for me, a lot of it's working with Brit. It's when you're a solo artist, I imagine that you have to really fight that voice a lot. But when you have somebody else there, it makes it easier.
Definitely.
Does this idea suck? Yeah, no, it doesn't suck. But what about if we did it this way? It's nice to have that kind of that feedback right away and that encouragement right away.
Bouncing ideas off each other, and also I think just the general practice of articulating what you feel. I remember feeling like I didn't have the vocabulary to talk to our drummer properly, and I was discouraged in a previous setup of the band from, I was not given the tools that I needed at that time. But then I realized if I just say I don't like it and that sound sucks, they're going to figure it out. The people that are good. And we just talked about that. If they're talented enough and if they're decent human beings, they will do that.
Yeah. Is there anything that you kind of won't do or kind of are afraid to veer into? Or is there something that like, do you just want to try everything?
That's a good, well, I guess it depends on what. Yeah. Well, we've been thrown some curveballs though lately. We had to write, well, we were offered an opportunity to write a song for a movie, and the song was like, we were basically asked to become this band that we weren't, but and write a song that we might otherwise find to be a little cheesy. But I think we ended up coming up with something that we really do like, even if it is so. I think what we have learned is that different from what you normally do or different from the sound that you have so far introduced people to does not mean cheesy. It just
totally,
you become adaptable, and if you're able to listen and process what your client needs, because sometimes it is that. It's like, hey, I'm hiring you to do this song. Do you want this opportunity to be featured in a film that millions of people are going to see? Or do you want to like not be cheesy? Which one would you like? So, again, some people might call it selling out, but I feel like we have learned what that actually means. We have learned what that means. And selling out usually means I'm too lazy to do this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a challenge. Challenges are good, I think, and this was a unique opportunity too, because we had a client who had lots of feedback. And so when it's just us, we're like, that's great. We love it. And I remember recording the first iteration of the song and everything was wrong. All right. And we had, we were paying for studio time. We were not in the studio at that point. And then we had to re-record everything. I was in a different state. It was last summer. It was just totally nuts. But you know what? It was a really good exercise. And in most cases, the producer or the director or whomever is in the room with you, giving you real-time feedback. This was a time difference. He was in Los Angeles. We were on the East Coast, and it was very difficult for that reason. But again, very good challenge. and we did a great job.
Yeah.
Yeah. How can you tell when something is wrong? I feel like a lot of times, and I say this a lot, but a lot of times in the creation process and the recording process, it's a lot of chiseling away at the marble that isn't the statue.
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
How do you kind of identify what isn't the statue?
Just doesn't feel right. There's something so basic about the feeling that you're getting when you're listening to something. And I don't know. It's beyond that. It's hard to describe, but you just have that feeling of we either need more, we need less, or it's completely off. It's not, I don't think anything we've ever written or workshopped is bad, but there's like a fine tuning, and it's like ingredients in a dish that have to be very like precise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What is your songwriting process?
Ooh. Melissa, you want to?
It's so...
If there is one.
It's like, there isn't one. There isn't one.
Yeah.
We just, and especially now, we're, with not being able to be together and, all of that, all of the complications that come along with having to do all these things remotely. I'm seeing even more now. Basically our process is we focus on a story or an idea, or like maybe one of us gets a hook in our head or a progression in our head, and then we share it with the other one when and if we feel like we're excited about it individually, and then we build from there. And the process can vary, if it depends on if we have time together, it depends on if we have musicians around, it depends on if I write lyrics without taking fucking 4 months to write them. Like it's just a mixed bag depending on our situation. Like our latest single that we released, Mother, that was one of the first songs where we were like, we have this much time to write this. Actually, that's not true. We've had time constraints before, but this was like, we had 2 days because this was the only amount of time we had with the producer. And that was our first time being in that situation. So what we ended up recording, we sat on for months. I mean, close to a year before we ended up getting it mixed again. I think the meeting, I need to go to another. Do I need to click another link to get to that?
Oh no! What it just told me was, hey, we just got rid of the
time limit.
The limit.
Love it.
Nice. Very cool. They must have heard all this amazing content.
Yeah, they're listening. They're listening.
But anyway, just to wrap up that anecdote, it was that was our first experience, having this much time. We recorded this much shit, and there was little doctoring of that original material that we could do. So then when we came back to it, I don't know, about a year later, we did re-record some things. But then after all of that, we ended up going back to that original track that we had recorded, on that time constraint, and just got somebody who we really trusted to mix it properly, and released a great track. So, but that was unlike anything we had done before. So I think again, it really depends. Britt, do you want to make sense of what I just said?
You make complete sense. Yeah, it's all over the place. I mean, I would say my style, I primarily start musically. Melissa is a very good writer and a very great poet, and I consider myself to be not that way. So I'm like, I'm just going to let her do it. And we both create vocal lines, and we both create music and have ideas, and sometimes we mash the two musical ideas together. But I always start at the piano. I always start pounding out some chords, and then we'll just take a, voice memo recording, send it to Melissa, and tell her, oh, I want to write a song about this. Or if she says, oh, this is a song about blank. And so, but we take a long time sometimes, unless we're under time constraints, which is such an interesting thing. If we're given like 2 weeks, oh man, we have a hit for sure. It's very interesting though, because I think if it's up to us, it'll take a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a funny thing that always seems to happen is that like there's a pendulum of like caring too much and not caring at all. And it's if you have a time constraint that's just like, well, here, write a song in a day, do it. And then you just like go for it. And then by the end of it, you're like, this is really cool. I like that.
Yes.
Or there's the other time constraint, which is like, I've been working on this magnum opus for my entire life and it's exactly what it needs to be. And either one works, but at the same time, it's like, at which point do you have to kind of let go of either one? Or when is it the right decision to be like, it may not be perfect, but I like it.
Right. Overthinking things, which of course I know we do.
Yeah, definitely. But we really have gotten better about reminding ourselves that we do that. And I think we just have improved in the overthinking.
Definitely.
Yeah, not letting it hold us back as much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is there common themes that you guys write about?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Taking down the patriarchy. Basically, I feel like that's most of it. I mean, relationships. Mm-hmm. What else?
Just, how we feel about things. But I think we embrace our weirdness in the way we communicate how we feel.
Yes.
And try not to we want people to understand us, but we also leave a lot up to our audience to figure out, like, right. Assume your audience is smart, assume your audience is capable of feeling, and assume that you don't have to explain everything. I remember getting that direction from a director. Like, you don't have to explain everything to the audience with your face. Like, they get it. So remembering that when we're writing and performing.
Yes.
Yeah. Is there kind of a style that you lean into? I feel like some people might lean more, here's a direct story that I'm telling, or sometimes it's like, here's just a tone poem, and you figure out what the heck this thing means, this mixture of words.
Yeah.
Gosh, yeah. I feel like sometimes we have specific stories. I think No King centers around our experience as women in a band and women in the world. Then we have Stay, which is about a very specific relationship. And, that I remember singing that song the first time, and this person who we sang about, he was right there staring at us in the front row, which was really fun, of course. Yeah. And then there's Cold Blood, which is like this crazy, like, death poem that takes place in like Antarctica or something.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, we like to embrace our weirdness. It's really fun.
Yeah.
Is there something that you are kind of eyeing in the horizon? You're like, I really want to try this thing, whatever that might mean, that you want to kind of stretch towards and see if maybe it's ambitious or maybe it's outside of your range, but whatever it might be, what's something that you want to reach for?
When it comes to creativity and writing, I just don't feel, I'm not concerned, because we're always like, well, let's try this, let's try that. What my goal is just to get fucking people to listen to us and hear us and come to our shows and get recognized by the music industry. And I can't help but focus on equity in our industry. I don't really think as much about the music because that part is easy. What do you think, Britt?
Yeah, that's absolutely accurate. Totally. There are elements of like arranging songs that I'd love to try, but holistically overall, I just try not to overthink too much about that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, since we kind of went into talking about the music business and all of the struggles within, what has been sort of the pushback that you guys get for whatever reason, being indie, being two women, being whatever it is in this giant flood of an industry?
Yeah, giant flood. That's a good way to describe it. I think, our experiences from what we've discussed with other female artists are pretty par for the course. There are some differences, of course, but showing up to venues and the sound person, usually a male, will go talk to the only other male in our band, instead of one of us who is the band. We are the band leaders. I think, in talking with Melissa about just how this industry works, I think that there's a general trust of men and a general distrust of women when it comes to bands.
Mm-hmm.
What else, Melissa?
That's a big one. That's one that you kind of just have to sit with for a second, because it's so, it feels so right on the head, well, another, just something that comes to mind while we're talking about this, which might shed light on what I'm feeling. We put together a show in Baltimore, and we got a lot of pushback because we insisted on the bill being diverse, reflective, diverse as far as, gender, race, etc. All of the others in our industry, we always try to contribute to uplifting those artists because we know how that feels. And I bring this up to say that it was not easy. We were met with a lot of pushback, and we were met with, oh, here's why you shouldn't do that. And here's why you should program this band of all white men, because they have this draw, and it always comes back to draw. Yeah. And of course we understand, like, venues have their bottom line. We get all that. I don't need the numbers, but the fact is, like, who is willing to do the work? And that means maybe taking a little bit of a hit with your drink sales or your, admission for one night because you want to uplift these artists in your community. So
those days are fucking over, though. I think we're we're seeing some sort of wave coming through, obviously, with what's going on in this country and in this world. And that is, first of all, it was never acceptable. Yeah. But now that shit is never going to be acceptable again. Yeah. And I think that people, instead of shirking away from calling people out, are going to sing it from the hilltops, whatever that freaking phrase is. It's probably inaccurate, but we're going to hold people accountable now, because even in 2020 that was still the case.
I did a screenshot months ago before things were going down with cancellations. I did a screenshot of 2 prominent venues here in Baltimore. I did a screenshot of all of the shows they had coming up. And I don't have to, tell you what my results showed. Very little representation. And of course, now that shit's going down and people are posting their, I stand with Black lives, I support equality, but I decided, okay, let me just go ahead and troll these motherfuckers for a second. And I put up all the screenshots and said, thank you for your statement. It really means a lot that you stand with Black lives. But I just want to show you these to remind you that, like, you got to do better. No response.
None. Oh, really? No response?
No response.
Wow. Very interesting. I'm not surprised.
A radio station put up they never said anything explicit like we stand with Black lives because they're cowards, but they did put up something that was, we're going to play the music of Motown like today because we're going to support these voices or something like that. Something very benign. And I wrote, how about playing on their Instagram or something? How about playing the music of local artists now, local artists of color now who are making music and supporting those musicians? Are you going to do something like that? And they just responded, yes. Which is great. I mean, great. You answered the question, but fuck off,
Oh my gosh, I love it.
I really do hope those days are over. And I hope that,
I hope
it still feels a little scary to stand up to those people, but I hope that fades.
Yeah. I was reflecting on that. Go ahead, Santiago. We've been talking a lot.
Oh, well, I mean, I think that I do also hope very much that those days are over, but at the same time, it's like every time that we think we make progress, we find ourselves very complacent
Yes.
after the fact and kind of fall right back into this pattern of like, oh, well, yeah, I mean, these are the popular things and these are the people who get the money and these are the people who get the listens and all this stuff.
Right.
How, I guess it's just this weird self-fulfilling prophecy that like we all, I don't know, are convinced that yeah, well, this is the music that'll go and this isn't the music. How do we kind of fight that other than just kind of like calling people out,
right.
which is successful in its own right. But then it's also like, how do you kind of make the rest of it good by itself, not even having to be like, oh, well, this is diverse.
Right.
So listen to, but just like, this is good. So listen to it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, I don't know I don't think people know how to prioritize that right now.
Yeah.
They don't know how, they can't make that differentiation. But I think what would help with that, I think this is answering the question, is that there's just not only better representation with as far as the artists, but of course the people in the positions of power. That has to change too. It can't just be like, we can't leave it up to, a bunch of white guys to say, okay, we're going to change now.
Right.
There has to be accountability for these people besides the artists yelling at them and saying you're not fair, because we're just, again, in our little, whatever bubbles screaming at each other about how unfair it is. And yeah, it is. But when are we going to be able to get FaceTime?
Exactly. It's the people in power who are the gatekeepers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And at the same time, we are also in power. We are many people.
That is very true.
We're capable of pushing back. I think that's something that is underestimated, the fact that like we just have the numbers.
Mm-hmm. No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right about that. I tend to forget that. So it's good to be reminded.
Yeah. But it is like I lost my train of thought. Someone else
that's easy to do when we're talking about all this stuff. I understand.
Oh my gosh. Totally.
Well, no, I think so the other path that I went down in my head is it's hard to make a kind of local industry grow outside of its own kind of insular base. I mean, I'm in Oklahoma, and I don't think anyone outside of Oklahoma knows about an Oklahoma music scene that isn't the Flaming Lips. And so the music scene in Oklahoma is very much like the musicians are the people who go to shows, and no one else does. And so it's just like everyone kind of supporting each other, but there's no one outside of music going to see music.
Yeah.
How do you kind of grow past that as a culture and as an industry?
Well, I think one idea is to put together some sort of show or event that brings in all types of performances or acts or something that would appeal to a broad audience. We did a show a few years ago that had comedy and music together, and I think it brought a lot of different people out. Of course, that's all, performing, this doesn't go beyond that. But we're seeing a lot of these sort of curated events popping up. We're seeing a lot of these. So we also did something in November where we did the whole Talking Heads live album.
Stop Making Sense.
Exactly. That I think people who just listen to that, who are obsessed with that, who know about the film, were very interested in coming out. So that's one idea of many.
Yeah, but it all goes back to both of those ideas and shows were this cross genre, I guess, idea. You know, you got that's kind of like how opera formed. Let's bring it all back. But you know, crossing all these disciplines, people were like going ham about orchestra, ballet, singing. Okay, boom, let's bring it all together.
Yeah.
It's this event. It was this social event, and somehow, I know it's hard for us to imagine that as musicians, but like somehow that has people have stopped seeing that as a social event. They've stopped seeing it as a way to gather and support a community. At least it seems that way. Maybe now it will change because of how cooped up everybody's had to be, and the immense loss that we're all experiencing right now. Maybe it will change, but I do think it became a hassle for people to go to attend things.
Yep.
And maybe and sorry not to, but and also what we were just talking about, if you don't feel supported and loved, you know, as a person of color, as a Black person, why the fuck are you going to go support an industry that doesn't give a fuck about you? That's another thing. So I think there's a lot of that that segregation in at least in Baltimore. You know, what shows are attended by who? First Thursdays are certainly well attended at WTMD, but when you look out in the crowd, you see a sea of white faces. So.
Yeah. And that kind of goes to the question I was going to ask, which is like, what characterizes the Baltimore music scene in your opinion?
You could write a book.
Yeah. Well, I think Melissa says something. She hits the nail on the head. It's segregated. So you have the Baltimore club scene where predominantly people of color are playing those shows, attending those shows. And then you have kind of this dad rock, you know, Americana, you know, a big radio station here in Baltimore, WTMD, is, you know, going out with mostly artists that are white who appeal to a very specific audience. So, you know, when we put shows together, we love bringing all genres into the mix. And because we know people are going to like things from each set. And, you know, we look for that broad appeal. But saying all of that and going back a little bit, I think that the Baltimore music scene is very supportive. We all support each other and uplift each other and are there for each other and collaborate with each other, which is, I think, very unique to this city.
Yeah. I don't know if like someone else can say it. Okay. Yeah. And then I guess going more on the, more business side, but it's something that I'm noticing as this is kind of a side story about myself and where I'm at, but like I work for ACM at UCO, which is a school in Oklahoma City that the manager of the Flaming Lips started. And he's been having these master classes since like 2009 and bringing in industry professionals. And it's my job to go through them and produce them as podcasts and transcribe them and stuff like that. Cool. And what I'm kind of noticing as a pattern is that like there are musicians who are just really good musicians in general. And like that is kind of what catapults them to their success. But a lot of times it is a huge combination of like management and record label and knowing the right people and all this sort of stuff. What sort of, in your guys' opinion, contributes to an artist's success?
I think a lot of what Britt was just talking about with supporting your community of artists, I think is pretty integral to artist success. And I could be saying something totally naive right now, but I believe that lifting up other artists and learning from other artists and building up your community is so important.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is who you know, less what you know, and just networking like crazy. and just meeting everybody you can and doing whatever you can to just put yourself out there and attend shows and listen to other artists that you may not listen to normally and connect with them on social or send them an email. Yeah, which is, basically uplifting however you can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Learning from what them, even if you're like, fuck this, what is this shit? But everybody else likes it. Like if I've learned anything in the last few years, it's that just because I think it's bullshit, who is the fool? Me thinking it's bullshit or everybody else who loves it? I've got to recognize, even if I don't particularly care for an artist's music, I've got to recognize and respect what they've accomplished.
Yes.
Right.
So, remembering that and like some degree, just always being open to learning from your colleagues.
Unless they're assholes.
And it's so obvious. And when they're assholes, yes, bring on the hate. Let's bring it on. Talk that shit.
Yeah. Dang it, I had a train of thought and then I lost it again. Which is good because I mean it just means that I'm interested in what you're saying rather than trying to find other things to say. But do you guys have a manager? Does that contribute to anything?
You're looking at him.
Woo! Yeah. We're the managers. Yeah.
And the thing is that like it is a hard thing to be an artist and then kind of manage the business side of things, manage the booking, manage the touring, manage the whatever, the studio time and all that stuff. How do you kind of balance all of the
There's no balance. There's no balance at all. It's totally draining and it totally takes away from our creative time. However, the payoff of what we know and how we are empowered as businesswomen is totally worth it. I mean, I feel like if somebody came in and like grabbed my larynx out of my throat, Indiana Jones or Temple of Doom style, I would have something else to do.
Yeah, that's true. I think about us running a series sometime or like a venue, like we would do it. We would just crush it because we've learned so much running the business aspect of Outcalls, and that's comforting in that way to be like, okay, we could do this.
Right. And we've gotten we've of course talked to managers, we've picked brains over the years and like really sat down and had conversations with people, like legit people, and gotten some good advice. But at the end of the day, it always comes back to like, this is something we have to do right now for ourselves. Like it's hard work, but we have to continue doing this. We can't outsource this right now. We're just not in a place to do that.
I think a common pitfall, too, with artists is that once you get a manager, that's it. You don't have to do any of this other business stuff, whereas like you have to maybe do twice as much when you have somebody else kind of hustling for you. So that's kind of an interesting thing to think about.
Totally.
Yeah. And I do feel like this is something that I struggle with because like, yeah, I don't have a manager, but I'm also just me. And I feel like I have a harder time kind of pimping myself out rather than whenever it's like a band and you have a name in front of it. It's not as much of like, hey, listen to me, I'm important enough for your time today. Rather, it's like, hey, this is a thing that I'm involved with. You should check it out.
Yeah, that's very true.
So, I mean, at least there is a little bit more of a disconnect and you're able to kind of promote it as something kind of other than yourself. What do you guys notice in kind of your branding or videos or whatever that really catches people's attention and kind of separates you from everything else?
It's polished.
It's content heavy. We're always doing photo shoots. I mean, before COVID, of course, always like just getting photos so we could promote our stuff online, or have album art, collaborating with people, just kind of really getting content, having content on social media, pushing out a music video or a song like once every 6 months, so people don't think we've died. Not that they really would, but just being strategic about that, I think.
Yeah. And being ourselves. Very much being ourselves, you know.
Yes.
How has COVID affected the whole endeavor?
Pause.
Yeah. We managed to write a song at the beginning of everything, which was pretty impressive. But yeah, no, at this point, obviously Melissa and I are not quarantined together. We've seen each other from a distance, but yeah, it's not easy.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny because we think that like, oh, we're just stuck inside. We just get to do all the things that we've been meaning to do. And it's like,
fuck that.
Sometimes we don't.
Right.
Have you been able to get some of the cool things done? Like, hey, here's a new song that I did during quarantine, or is it just like, I'm just binge watch some Netflix?
Well, there's nothing completed yet, but in recent weeks we have rolled back over like, okay, let's talk about some ideas and let's not rush ourselves. But yeah, we've really taken the time. It's been hard. It's been really, really hard. And I think, and that's what I'm grateful that, I am in a band with somebody who understands that, because I feel like if I was being pressured right now, I would just lose my shit and I might quit music altogether. I don't know if that might be, but you know what I'm saying? It's like, everybody's different and people need their time. Some people want to like bang out an album and others are like, I just need to think about what the fuck I'm going to put on today.
It's been an adjustment, I think, for everybody, every single person. And while there have been moments of creativity and feeling that spark, for the most part, I'm just trying to survive. I'm trying to get from day to day. And slowly but surely that stuff is coming back. But only now. Yeah. After 3-4 months, basically. I don't even know how long we've been in this. It's so crazy.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's hard enough being a musician in general, and then just getting rid of the in-person aspect of it.
Yeah.
Has there been an endeavor to kind of try something remotely anyways, or trying some sort of live stream sort of thing? Have you guys thought about that?
We haven't thought about the live stream because that all happened in like the first 2 weeks of this, and it was just like crazy overload. Yeah. But we're talking now about maybe doing some socially distant Porch jam concert session as a benefit for an organization in Baltimore, which I think would be is a great thing that we can do. It's outside. People can keep their distance, stay safe. And the wheels are starting to turn about, here's the stuff that we can do for an EP, sitting down at the piano, plunking out some stuff. We have so much stuff, but as Melissa said, neither of us wants to pressure the other one to do anything when it's just like, let's take some time. We can do this, at any time. Yeah. Let's just take care of our families, take care of ourselves, and that's the most important.
Yeah, and thankfully, I think for us, our timing with our latest releases was perfect. Like, there's very little guilt associated because we just released a song and we just released a music video, and that helps because it's like we did something. We don't need to rush.
Right.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to forget. There's nobody's going to forget. And also it's different when everybody's going through it at the same time. I mean, I don't know how you feel about this, Santiago, but when I see people releasing music right now, I'm like glad for them, but I have no interest in even listening to it right now. I'm like, I got to go fucking rake the lawn.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it is a little overwhelming too. And even just looking at like my podcast feed, that like I'm not driving now. And so it's like, I have just like, I'm like 2 weeks behind on podcasts. And it's just like, oh, it'll take me like a month to catch up to this.
Yeah.
And even that little thing of like, so yeah, artists that are releasing new music is a little bit scary looking in a way too, that it's just like, look, I don't have time to, like, we think that we have more time, but it's just like, I don't have the space in my day now for these sort of idle things that I used to have while I was driving or going to lunch or something.
Yeah, that makes a good point.
The space for music.
Right. Yeah. I want to consume these kinds of things socially with my people. I want to be like, did you check out that album? Let's talk about it. And, you know, finding the motivation to do that, you know. Yeah. I'd rather go cry in the shower, you know.
The state of the world doesn't help. Like if we were probably in a little bit more of like a secure point.
This is a great point.
Politically and economically, maybe it wouldn't be as bad, but also like
you're so right about that.
You're right.
Now.
You're right.
I feel totally abandoned by, you know, our leaders. I feel like, especially now, like with the like lack of care and just kind of like, oh, we're just not going to talk about this being a problem anymore. Meanwhile, like more people are dying. I feel, and I never thought about it like that. I just kind of thought, okay, this all sucks. But yeah, what would it be like to be in a place right now where the people you elected into office care about your well-being? What would that be like? Or to feel like there was some next step to look forward to?
Yeah, totally.
And I'm sure it's probably that way, and maybe in like Scandinavian countries that it's like, yeah, like you have your paid time off, you have healthcare, you have all these things, so it's like you're good. Just like be careful, guys.
Yeah, right.
And it's like, all right, cool, thanks.
Totally,
usual, I guess.
Totally,
so true, so true.
I guess a couple more thoughts. Is there a purpose to a distinction anymore between EP, studio albums, singles, or is it all just kind of like, here's the output of the thing? What does it mean to put out an album versus putting out an EP versus putting out a single?
It's a great question.
I don't know if, like, I hear that EPs and albums, like, as long as you're putting something out, people really like that. That's good. I've heard albums described as like, I can't think of the word. Just like
vanity projects.
Thank you. Vanity projects. Exactly.
Yep.
And if you have material for an EP, I think that I consider that an album. Honestly.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
absolutely.
And I think singles, it's like, I just want to hear what people are working on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a good question, but it goes back to like where the industry is right now and streaming versus people buying physical things. I mean, it's just buying physical media right now has become more of a thing of the past. I mean, with the exception of vinyl, I suppose, but overall, you know, people are consuming stuff on Spotify. They're consuming singles.
Yes.
So I think to stay afloat, depending on where you are as a band, you know, but to stay afloat and to stay relevant, of course, the strategy of releasing singles is fine. It's totally fine. Releasing an album, fine. But when you think about the cost, artists like us, we can't afford to put out an album.
Yeah. So true.
Yeah. It's just whatever your strategy is. If you got the money to put out an album, why not? But otherwise, like how are your materials better used? Can you, like, we have to space shit out because that's just where we're at right now.
Yeah. Has the medium change of like people not consuming albums and people streaming everything, has that changed your creative output in sort of how you approach the output of, well, instead of doing a whole album, which people won't consume over time and it'll be less profitable or whatever that might mean, has your approach changed based on the medium?
I don't think so. I think if anything, I just feel less pressure.
How has Baltimore reacted to COVID differently? Because like I was just saying, Oklahoma doesn't really seem to care about COVID. And I feel like even the like musicians are itching to go out and start playing stuff again. And I'm still just like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to be running sound at a church here in next week. I'm still like, I don't know.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I think Baltimore, I feel like, has taken it very seriously. For the most part. I mean, the people that I'm around, I feel like, have taken it very seriously. I went to see my mother back in May, I think. And she lives in Connecticut and in a big hot spot where there are a ton of cases and, it's right on the edge of New York City. And I feel like people just were not paying attention. They weren't wearing masks. Wow. And I was really shocked at how little people were taking it seriously.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like I've been in the house. It's hard to just say who's taking it seriously and who isn't. But I agree with Britt. I think, when at least the outings that I have made with going to the grocery store or, I have a church job that I still go to on Sunday mornings because it's live streaming and I'm the only one in the sanctuary. The organ player's in the loft, so we have no contact. And, I had noticed that there were some people getting pretty close that didn't seem to be distancing, like the people up on the altar. But then I would go into the liquor store on my way home and everybody was wearing a mask. They only let 10 people in at one time. People were wearing face shields. So it just depends on the neighborhood. It depends on, people's knowledge of what's going on. And yeah, of course I'm mad about people who don't care, but now I'm just starting to realize they have no fucking guidance. They have people telling them oh, everything's fine. We can open back up. I mean, their government's literally opening the state back up. Some people have no choice whether or not they can go back to work or collect unemployment because their unemployment's going to get canceled if they say, no, I don't feel safe going back to work. It's just such a fucking mess. But so I didn't really answer the question. I just went on a rant. No. But it seems like there was a lot of care and the streets were quiet for a few months. And now all of a sudden it's
people are starting to just get frustrated and they want to go outside. They want to socialize. They want to go to restaurants. And that's what we're seeing.
And myself included. I mean, I went out to Shenandoah National Park a couple of days ago, and I went to Assateague yesterday, and of course, wore masks, distance, didn't go, packed all my own food. But, I'm still going out. I'm still not doing on lockdown how I was in February, March, April, May. So yeah. Or no, it wasn't February, it was March, whatever. What is time?
Yeah. So what is time?
But yeah, the other aspect of that is how can we safely go back to what we're doing? So it's I want to respect people making the decision to go do things as long as they do them safely. But what about people who are just going about, business as usual, mixed in with those people who are trying to be safe? It's everybody's still at risk when you do that.
Yeah. And I mean, here in Oklahoma, I see the proportion of people wearing masks to people not wearing masks is you rarely see people wearing masks, which is scary. And I don't know, me being a singer, you guys being a singer, it's hey, I would like to keep my lungs for a while.
Yeah.
How about that?
So I mean, it is a little bit scarier, but I don't know, maybe just over time people are just gonna disregard it even without the vaccine and be it'll be fine.
Yeah. Well, right, because when you don't get it or you don't think you have it, then you maybe you just have this feeling of immunity. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. But I know I feel shamed if I forget my mask and I'm
exactly.
I feel fuck. I'm digging in the car to see what donation bag I have that might have a T-shirt I can throw around my face. I just feel too ashamed. So I don't know. I don't know.
It's definitely the opposite here. It you are in the minority if you're wearing a mask. It's like,
wow.
oh, that person's wearing a mask. So it's like it feels the opposite direction here in that I feel weird wearing a mask.
Wow.
Yeah, very interesting.
So I mean, so it goes. I mean, it's not like Oklahoma's very high on the totem pole for like education and all that stuff. So like,
well, I wonder how it's going to affect. I wonder what's the first show going to be like?
Right.
When and what is it going to be like? Is it going to be outside? Are we going to be feeling nervous? Are we going to feel pressure to do it? Yeah.
My guess would be that it would be churches first, because that's how they get all their money anyways.
Yeah.
They want all these old people to be here in person, giving them money, because they don't know how to use whatever electronic forms of tithing or whatever. They don't want to give the computer their card. And so churches do need to, I feel like they're feeling the most pressure from this, because it is literally an entire economic model that is based around people gathering in a space.
Yeah.
And that also involves music. And so, a church that I run sound for is already trying to, they're going to do some live streaming type stuff, but then not that much farther out afterwards, they're going to start opening it up. So, and they kind of have to.
Yeah.
And so I think that probably bars and clubs and venues are going to start feeling that too. And I think the pressure economically is probably going to be far greater than the fear. And so it's like, yeah, I get sick and I'll be out for a month, but like at least I'll have like my job afterwards or something.
Yeah.
But if you go bankrupt now, you're bankrupt forever. So like, yeah. I feel like now I'm rambling. So
no, it's totally fine. I am too. It's hard not to.
To end at least this podcast. Where can we find you and your things, either as Outcalls or individually?
You can go to outcallsband.com. Don't type in Outcalls in a Google search. You might find something that you weren't expecting. And we have links to all our social on our website, and places to listen to the music, places to purchase the music. Outcalls.bandcamp.com is where you can buy a bunch of merchandise and our music as well.
Yes, we have great merch, great T-shirts, buttons and things like that.
Pay for music
stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, also that.
And then I guess you guys individually have your own lives outside of Outcalls. So if you want to promote those things too.
Sure. You can go to BrittOlsenEcker.com. Bet you don't know how to spell that because I have 7 million names. But it's BrittOlsenEcker.com.
How do you remember how to spell your name?
I have to practice it.
Yeah, and I'm at melissawimbish.com. Everything, of course, of mine has been canceled, like as far as classical stuff. But there is a possibility I'll be performing with the BSO in November if that's still on.
Woohoo!
So we'll see.
Yeah, I hope so.
And that's all of our music is on Spotify as well. If you want to take a listen to that.
Yeah. Maybe some composers need to write like more like 1 to 2 people operas.
Yes, totally. That'll help.
So it's just like,
well,
all right, cool. Let's just have one person on stage and we'll just stream it or something.
The one tweet that I noticed recently was like that I've seen a few times pop up is, what are all the mono dramas for singers? Like, please leave a list here. I'm seeing that pop up more.
Yeah.
So
okay. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you guys for doing this with me. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having us. It's been great to talk to you.
You can find everything that I do on my website, santiagoramones.com. I make music. I have an album coming out on August 8th. It is called Bloom. It will be streaming everywhere. The weeks leading up to the album's release, bit depth will be daily, which means that I will be breaking down every track on Bloom like a song exploder type thing, and you get to listen to the whole album before it's even released. But once it is released, you can stream it everywhere on Spotify, Apple Music, and all of the like. But if you buy it on Bandcamp, there is some bonus content there for you, so you have things to enjoy beyond just the music. I also make music with Power Cycle, an experimental electronic trio. We will have an EP and an album coming out later this year. That is a lot of stuff, and we're not even in the same state anymore. Isn't that neat? But for right now, you can listen to, stream, download, whatever, our album Too Many Damn Cables. It is completely improvised. Those other 2 pieces of content that will also be coming out this year are also completely improvised. I'm sensing a pattern here, but check that out. You can also download this podcast anywhere you can find great podcasts. You can leave comments, reviews. Let me know what you think. And I'm excited to show you who else has been on this podcast recently. I always end the podcast with my 3 things. They shape my life philosophy. Those 3 things are: love never fails, it's going to be okay, I might be wrong.